when our heart is in a holy place, when our heart is in a holy place, we are blessed with love and amazing, when our heart is in
in a holy place, you could say. When I first heard Dr. Parker speak, I was at home, which is a holy place. I was cleaning my home, actually, and I know NPR, National Public Radio, isn't the Bible or Scripture, but I did have NPR on in my home. God is still speaking right here in this sanctuary. It's been happening all morning. It's always. I was at home cleaning my house, dusting, vacuuming, doing dishes, and catching little pieces of the program that was coming over my radio until I couldn't, I had to stop doing what I was doing. I had to turn off my vacuum cleaner because it was making way too much noise. And I had to tune in to the voice, to the words, and to the wisdom I was hearing. It was a man's voice. You know, when I was trying to figure out who the person was, the way we do when we hear just a voice. And the more he spoke, the more I was drawn in, just deeper, deeper, deeper. And the more I realized I had never heard anybody speak like this before. I had never heard anybody, man or woman, speak about women so honestly, so openly, with so much compassion and care and intelligence and context. And I just remember just standing there, and crying, just being so overwhelmed by the power of the truth when it's spoken. And I decided to track him down, and I did. I used that mighty tool we have called email and contacted all the reproductive justice activists I knew in the world of Unitarian Universalism, and got his email and invited him to Tulsa. And I am thrilled that he's back, that he considers us his family. I know every time I talk to him, I learn something, more than one thing, new. So prepare to be challenged and moved. He is a teacher of many disciplines. He has a new book out, Life's Work, A Moral Argument for Choice. You might have seen it in the news. Lately, it's been on The Daily Show, on the back of Time magazine, at a book party with Gloria Steinem. It's getting rave reviews. Unfortunately, we don't have it on sale for you this morning, but I hope you'll look for it. I started reading it last night, and it's really, really, really good. And you should know just a little bit more about Dr. Parker. So he holds a degree from the University of Iowa College of Medicine, as well as degrees from the Harvard School of Public Health, the University of Cincinnati, and the University of Michigan. Most recently, the United Nations Office of Human Rights recognized him as one of 12 women's human rights defenders. Yes. Abortion, as we know, is a complicated issue, a polarizing issue. Somebody in the hall today, I don't think it's what Dr. Parker is talking about today, but it wouldn't make sense not to say a word about it. I love what Marlon said at the end of the 10 o'clock service. You know, there's no litmus test for belonging to this congregation, for being a member here. You don't have to take any position on abortion to learn from what Dr. Parker has to say. So that's important to be said. I think the book will help you, if you're struggling to figure out where you stand on the issue, it will help you figure out what you think and what you feel and what you know to be true about these complicated, complex issues. It is critical, it's important today, I think, to say that Dr. Parker is a Christian who chooses to provide abortions in high-need communities because of his, not in spite of, but because of his religious convictions. And that's a critical point to make because it disrupts the current dominant narrative in the United States of America today and in other places on this globe, that religious beliefs and conducts are at odds with the right to abortion and the performance of abortion. So this defining and redefining what it means to be a Christian today is work that we take seriously here at All Souls, and we're honored to do with Dr. Parker. He identifies as a man and as a feminist. He's a profoundly caring and compassionate and creative person who also happens to have been married in this past year. You know, kind of exciting. So I hope you'll give a warm, warm welcome. It's my honor, pleasure, and joy to introduce Dr. Willie Parker to you this morning.
Good morning, family. I'm happy to be back here at All Souls, my home away from home when I'm in Tulsa. It's my privilege to be in community with you again as I seize the opportunity to be inspired and hopefully to inspire you to go forward just a little bit longer. I'm happy to be here with you, my kinfolk, at this moment in our country where those who would seek to consolidate their power by dividing us. My way of resisting this effort to divide us is to dive deeper into my understanding of relationship and kinship, because kinship is a stronger bond than the groupings and the categories that we are currently being exploited by. I'm from down south, Alabama, and down south, I remember as a kid, if we were to go into a neighborhood where someone didn't recognize us, they would ask, who are you kin to? Who your folk? Who your kinfolk? I even know as a physician working in the hospital, when you go into the hospital and when you're registering, they ask you to list who is your next of kin. The famous Black Renaissance author Zora Neale Hurston once uttered in response to perhaps someone trying to limit her to her group on the basis of race. Zora Neale Hurston, who's a Black woman, said, all my skinfolk ain't kinfolk. Now let me be clear. I love me some Black people, right? But let me also be clear about the additional insight I took when I turned that phrase around to read, all my kinfolk ain't my skinfolk. While I love people who look like me, what I care more about is what your values are. What are your ethics? And what are your politics based on those? And I care more about those things than I do about whether or not our mothers are the same color. In other words, there's more to friendship and affinity than there is to mere skin solidarity. Now, I splurged this morning by agreeing to speak at both services, and I had the option of giving the same message twice, but I had some things in me that I needed to get out. Have you ever been like that, where you had some things that you needed to say? So I had some things that I wanted to say, so I took the liberty and the opportunity to prepare a second message to share with you today. Maybe some of you, I've seen a couple of people who were in the first service and they came back anyway. Thank you. In the traditional service, I spoke about losing one's Christian religion to find the religion of Jesus. Two things that I've found that are not the same. The religion of Jesus, that Palestinian Jew who turned the Roman Empire upside down with soul force, was a religion defined by humanity and compassion, in stark contrast to the current American understandings of Christianity preoccupied with judgment and punishment. Jesus rejected the religious order of his day to place people at the center of the religion instead of having people being overly concerned about the religion. In doing so, he broke with tradition. He challenged the rigidity of pietistic religion with a responsiveness of love for the people, and when need be, turning over tables in the temple when he had to do that. That act of defiance seemed blasphemous and irreverent to the authorities of his day, but it was tantamount to what one of my Hindu friends told me when he criticized his religious tradition by doing what he said, slaughtering sacred cows. In the Hindu tradition, cows are revered animals, and he once opined to me with a bit of a reverence that only you can do from within a tradition. I would never disparage Hinduism as I am not a Hindu. But he said, in a bit of a reverence, that sacred cows make great hamburgers, in reference to the fact that in his country where cows are sacred, he was troubled by the fact that the cows were well-nourished and the people were starving. This morning, I tried to slaughter a few sacred cows in my earlier remarks, and I will do so in my talking with you, because we are now in the midst of a Christian faith tradition that flourishes at the expense of the suffering of people. So if you're here this morning, you were drawn by the title of my remarks, God is Trans. I'm giddy about that because I succeeded in the well-intended craftiness of luring you here to this talk. Right. God is trans. Now, there are people who heard that. They said either, oh my God, or there are some people who said, yes. And there are some people who said that that is absolutely blasphemous to put God and trans in the same conversation. So whatever your response was, I'm glad that you're here, and I hope that you'll hear me out. Now, trans anything has been a hot and provocative topic. The Trans-Canada Keystone Pipeline was hotly contested for its environmental impact on First Nations land in the Dakotas. The Transformer movie franchise made lots of money for folk. But the flashpoint of trans that I'm interested in that is front and center today is the notion of transgender phobia that is occupying a larger space in the American psyche. It's prompted politicians to pass laws that are concerned about which restroom one can use to potty based on the sex indicated on your birth certificate. Not to mention the violence, death, and now the political dismissal of trans people by the current administration. And as we all should be about injustice, people of faith should be concerned about the attack on trans people, and hopefully that compassionate concern will lead to compassionate action. As I struggled to figure out what my role as a cisgendered, heterosexual man, Black man should be on the issue of transphobia, I took the liberty of musing about what it would mean if we understood God to be trans. Here we go. First of all, this is not a proselytizing moment. So whether or not you have a God understanding, I'm assuming by your being here that you can at least entertain the prospect of a supreme being. Someone, something, somewhere that is wholly other. If you can do that, at least for the duration of my remarks, what I'm about to say will make sense to you, even if at the end you have to dismiss it. So breathe, have a woosah moment. So if America is a nation under God, as we understand ourselves and often proclaim to be to the rest of the world, what would we How would we treat trans people differently if we somehow could see the image of God in them? If God were trans versus seeing them as misfits and reprobates? As I thought about this, I immediately recalled the popular song from a few years ago by an artist by the name of Joan Osborne. The title of the song was, "What If God Were One of Us?" You remember that song? What if God were one of us? What if God were one of us? Just a stranger on the bus trying to make his way home. What if we could look for God in others, as the Mahatma Gandhi once said, and look only for the devil in ourselves? That's when, in my inner witness, the challenge came. Something said to me almost audibly as I'm talking to you, but I promise I don't hear voices, and if I do, I'll check myself in for a 72-day hold to be evaluated. But in my inner witness, something said, God is one of us. God is trans. Now, I see you sitting back in your seat saying, okay, this is going to be good. So if you'll go with me, I'll make the case for God being trans. God is trans, but bigger than the way that you might think. Because, see, God is transcendent of gender, transcendent of race, transcendent of nationality, transcendent of biological sex, transcendent of political partisanship. What's my proof? As I meditated on this subject, my recall led me to the following passage of sacred text from Paul's letter to the Galatian Christians, declaring the radical equality and transcendent nature of the religion of Jesus that they were believing in. And I compared that to the rigid understanding held by the Judaism of their day about who they would often declare who had favor with God, who was God's chosen. And he offered them the following understanding in Galatians 3:28. He said to the Galatian church, there is neither Jew nor Gentile, neither slave nor free, nor is there male and female, for you are all one in Christ Jesus. Now that's an endorsement of trans, if I've ever heard one. There was room, there was nothing binary and categorical. He said, whatever these extremes you hold, you're all one in Christ Jesus. In my mind's eye, I can see the question arising from these people about who the chosen were, especially as they, as new converts to the religion of Jesus, interfacing with Judaism, were having to face with the Jews saying, we are the chosen people. Then in that day, the Jews said, we are the chosen people. Today in America, it is, America's a Christian nation favored by God, America first. That this is our national declaration, a declaration that we make as we rush to war, as we refuse to solve poverty and homelessness, as we fail to protect all of our citizens, and as we shame women for having abortions and deny poor women the resources to seek an abortion or the knowledge and the supplies to prevent the circumstances that lead them to need an abortion. We say that God is first. We are a Christian nation. We invoke the name of God and we profess to seek his wisdom, claim to do his bidding, and as political candidates march to the office, vetting themselves by declaring that they are Christians because we impose that unofficial litmus test around people aspiring to the highest office of power. We make needing help in this country and in this society shameful, and we dismantle the very systems that would allow us to assist the less fortunate in our borders in any meaningful way. We profess the love of God, a Christian God who is indifferent to the ways in which we imperil the planet. It's our national identity, and anyone who fails to co-sign this perspective is deemed unpatriotic. So in response to this understanding, this American exceptionalism, this American self-importance of saying that it is a Christian nation, I say, and I make my first argument, God is trans. God is transcendent of national borders, and God has no nationalistic tendencies. The trans God, if you'll indulge me and let me use as a shorthand instead of saying the transcendent God, I'll just say the trans God or trans God. Trans God, if you'll indulge me, has no favorite nation and hence has no need to build walls around this country. It hit me once as I was taking off on a flight, and I looked out the window from my window seat, and I looked back onto the earth, and as the plane rose and I looked down on the earth, it hit me. There are no border lines drawn anywhere on this planet. There are no nations. There's no map of the U.S. that you can see as you take off on a plane. Trans-God does not know national boundaries. As the great Christian contemplative Thomas Merton once said, the mystery of God is that God's center is everywhere with boundaries nowhere. So the trans-God also has no nationality. We have decidedly made God American, and hence we have self-declared that we are God's favorite. In fact, if God were a shirt, the label would say Made in America. In the history of America, God's status as the most important American has led us to put God's name on our money, take land and massacre indigenous people in the name of God, enslave Africans under the guise of Christianizing savages in the name of our American God. We've been led to drop nuclear bombs on other countries and to self-decree that we are the world's guardians of the democracy that we have never practiced, all while we invade and overthrow governments in the name of God. That is the American God, but the trans God has no nationality. James Brown once said in a song, it's a man's world, but somewhere I read the earth is the Lord's and the fullness thereof. And because of that, I argue that the trans God has no gender, so it can't be a man's world. There's a quip that I learned for the first time years ago that said that when God created man, she was only kidding. And I remember being uncomfortable with that notion that someone would kid that God is a woman, rooted in my fundamentalist patriarchal understanding that I adhered to before I embraced the notion that God was transcendent of these identities. I assume that the writers of the Bible never paused to say to God, God, we're writing the Bible, and before we go any further, we just need to know what your pronouns are. And since, in lieu of that question, they were all men, I guess they just decided that he, him, and his would do. Seriously, though, somehow, in our effort to see and embrace God as Father, we have made him a widow because we killed off God as mother. There is no goddess, making it impossible for those born female or those who become women to see in themselves the image of God. The American God is Father and only speaks to and through men, even on issues that pertain to women. But somewhere I read that God is no respecter of person. Somewhere I read that male and female created God them. Paul told the Galatians that in the religion of Jesus, there is no male or female. It is a false God that does not contain the image of woman and man and gender nonconforming people. A God where she and hers or they and theirs don't express attributes of God to the same degree that he and his does is too small and too limited. The trans God is either male, female, and wholly other, or none of them. As the great Christian contemplative Thomas Merton again once said, the mystery of God is that God's center is everywhere and boundary is nowhere. God is not you or I, and yet God is not someone, something, or somewhere else. The imago Dei, or the image of God, is in every one of us. Hence, gendered descriptions of God to the exclusion of the other is to deny the divine presence and maleness or femaleness or transness or gender nonconformity of all persons. Either God is all or God is none. The transcendent God is the God of mankind, of womankind, of humankind. In this moment of blatant white supremacy, let me slay another sacred cow. Let me challenge a foundational lie that facilitates white superiority. The transcendent God has no color. I'm going to slay this sacred cow right here. The perpetuation of a racialized understanding of God who always ends up being Caucasian has been perpetrated by the American church, where Jesus has blonde hair and blue eyes despite being of Palestinian origin. My friends and I jokingly say that if Jesus was God, the most miraculous thing apparently that he ever did was not to turn water into wine. It was to be a white man from Palestine. Right. Right. Jesus was a man from Palestine. Forensic archaeologists have declared that if this was so, then he was most likely about 5'5", with brown hair, brown eyes, and brown skin. Therefore, he could not have been white. Personally, I like to imagine God as about 5'11", 200 pounds, chocolate brown skin, bald, with a well-groomed salt and pepper beard. But seriously, therein lies the problem, isn't it? By the time we're done imagining God, the God that we envision looks more like us or looks more human. And so by the time we imagine God, God looks more human than we ever look divine. And we're called to be in God's image, not the other way around. That we've made Jesus a Protestant white man has led to our ability to drop bombs on people who don't look like us or who don't believe as we do. It's led us to have an isolationist mentality that our prayer nationally has been like a prayer that I heard as a child. There was a deacon that we used to joke about. By the time he did his prayer was simply, God bless me, my brother Joe, his four, and no more. I've seen bumper stickers that carry that sentiment that say in rebuttal to this notion of God bless America, the bumper sticker says, God bless the world. A trans God insists that we think beyond borders and beyond race and beyond gender. Trans God challenges us to let go of the idea that there are billions of people on the planet in favor of the fact that there is one humanity. My college motto at Berea College in Kentucky was, "It is from one blood that God has made all the nations of the earth." There is one race, the human race. The image of trans God is one of no color. Trans God has no partisan politics. The American God is partisan and has become Republican. American evangelical pastor Jim Wallace says that God is neither a Republican nor a Democrat, and I agree with him. Trans God is not a Democrat or a Republican. A God whose center is everywhere and whose boundaries are nowhere is too big to be partisan, too transcendent to take sides. As best I can tell, if God does take sides, it is always with the poor and the downtrodden. And hence our alliance should be with the poor and the oppressed. The trans God is a God of mercy, of compassion, and justice. And because the trans God is a God of justice, that God is also a God of peace. As Reverend Davis said before, in the words of Dr. Martin Luther King, if you want peace, you must work for justice. Because peace is not the absence of tension, it is the presence of justice. So, as I close, God is trans, and we should all be working to be trans, working to be transcendent of race, nationality, gender, and anything else that stands in the way of a fuller humanity. Blessings be upon us all.
You're my brother, you're my sister, so take me by the hand. Together we will work until we're done. There's no foe that can defeat us when we're walking side by side. Long as there is love, we will stand. You're my brother, you're my sister, so take me by the hand. Together we will work until we're done. There's no foe that can defeat us when we're walking side by side. As long as there is love, we will stand.
Hey, we're so happy you're visiting with us online today. We love connecting with people all across the country and around the world, sharing our powerful message of love beyond belief.
There's something new happening here. You can now join All Souls as a virtual member. Our virtual membership is designed for friends who live outside of Tulsa, Oklahoma, and who want to engage with All Souls in a meaningful way.
You can be part of an expanding family, a global family really, wherever you are. If you live in Oklahoma,
Ohio,
or Orange County, California,
Canada,
or Cameroon. By becoming a virtual member, you'll be able to deepen your connections with members and friends here in Tulsa and with members wherever you are.
Each week, you'll receive special All Souls content tailored for you, our virtual members. Virtual members have access to pastoral care, to personal prayers, and also receive invitations to exclusive web events.
You can learn more, and if you're ready, you can become a virtual member today by visiting allsoulschurch.org/virtual membership.
We're grateful our ministries are having a positive impact on your life, and we want to share the good news of love beyond belief with more and more people. So no matter what, we need your support to keep this ministry growing and thriving, so please consider making a gift today. You can do so by texting
Love BB for Love Beyond Belief to 73256 or simply visit our website. You are a blessing in our lives. May you be blessed.
and be a blessing.